Yes, I know I need a haircut. No, you don't need to put it in the comments. We're going to try to do this every day. I'm going to try to do this every day, or at least Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, because normally we record the actual podcast on Wednesday. So I'm going to leave that day open. Um, but, we're going to try to do some stuff. So obviously, Enzo Maresca is sacked by Chelsea yesterday. Not sacked. They left by mutual consent, you might say. They separated, maybe not amicably, but they are separated. So, how did Chelsea get to this point? It's an interesting question, and these shouldn't be longer than 20, 30 minutes. I'm going to leave it to my own attention span. Chelsea are here because the mission goal that was set out at the beginning of this Clearlake project was abandoned after I think Graham Potter was in charge for 31 games, 32 games. Someone can check for me. But just north of 30 games, Graham Potter is sacked. If you really want to get into like the mud, the geopolitical mud, there's a NATO incursion on Russia from the Russian point of view. Uh, Putin is like, nah, he attacks Ukraine. Anybody who's associated in the nominal West with Putin, they get their shit snatched. So Roman Abramovich and Chelsea included, and that starts the ball rolling. Which means, I mean, there's a long, long historical story that you could tell. But if we just want to keep it to football, Clearlake and Todd Boehly, which are two different things, which we'll get into, had purchased the club from Roman Abramovich, or really from the British government, who seized the asset and was able to sell it for 2 point something billion, 3 point something billion, depending on your currency. In Uganda shillings, we're talking trillions. Sorry, sorry, my people. In any event, um, they buy the club, and I think I was one of the first ones who said that Thomas Tuchel's not surviving. He isn't going to survive within a matter of months or weeks. And I remember a lot of people on Twitter were saying, "How could you say that? Thomas Tuchel is one of the greatest. He's just won a Champions League. He's got us competing X Y Z." And I was like, "Look, when any ownership group, but in particular American ownership group, it happens in the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, hockey, MLS, wherever you look at American sports, the people who come or who buy the club always have a guy in. There's always a head coach already there normally, but the new ownership group comes in and they rip up everything because they want no memory of what happened before, because they know better. They're the people with the ideals. We're the smart ones. We're the billionaires. You know, not that intelligence and money should ever be linked. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Um, but they think that they're smart. So they're like, this coach who's won a Champions League and everything. Todd Bowley's like, do you want Cristiano Ronaldo? Would you like to play 4-4-3? So they set the table as, we're going to try to be inclusive. We're not going to shake it. Like, we're just going to leave everything how it is. But really underneath, in a matter of time, Thomas Tuchel is leaving. So they bring in Graham Potter, as I said. You could make an argument, and I did make the argument at the time, that this was their plan all along. They seem to really love the Brighton setup, and they've gone in for how many Brighton players over the course of this, I don't know, foray into football. They got Potter, they got Cucurella, they got Sanchez. Uh, I'm forgetting another, Caicedo. There's so many Brighton exports in the Chelsea team, on the pitch and off the pitch, that you could make a case that Chelsea had a plan. At least this new owner, Bluecoat, they had a plan. Their plan was, we're going to give it to Graham Potter because we've earmarked him as manager. But after 31 games, and I know I need a haircut. Don't worry about it. Let me worry about it. After 31 games, they sack him. And I'm sticking with 31 because 31 is my favorite number, and I feel like I remember that. So they sack him. So now what you've done is you've given the the kind of indication that there's a plan. And the plan is Tuchel isn't our guy, but Potter is our guy. And we're going to sign him to this long contract. We're going to give him time to build a squad, or not even to build a squad, but to develop the squad that we give him, which is going to be young players aged 21 to 24, and hopefully they will grow together. It got so bad, so toxic. I think he won maybe a third of his games. So maybe he won 12 or 11 games while he was in charge of Chelsea Football Club. They have to sack him because it's just so untenable. Once they sack him, there is no plan. You could make the case there was a plan, but now there is no plan. The plan is there is no plan. Lampard comes in, does okay with what he's with what he's asked to do as an interim boss, but you know he's not coming for another term. Pochettino comes in, does pretty bad in the first, let's say, 60% of his season. And then in the back end of that season, I remember Chelsea started winning games. Maybe they won 5 in a row or something like that. They started winning games. And I was like, okay, this is good. Like, they qualified for Europe when it didn't seem like they would. But Pochettino falls out with the board. He's like, I don't want to do this. In the same way that the board maybe fell out with Thomas Tuchel. But I think that was more inevitable. So now they hire some no-name dude named Enzo Maresca. Not that he's no-name, but he's a championship manager. He was at the top of the table with Leicester. But you're going to give the championship Leicester Chelsea Football Club, which should be, in a perfect world, a top 10 European club. Am I right about that? Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich. The Italian clubs are a bit weird. PSG, Manchester United, in a perfect world, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Juventus, AC Milan, Inter, Chelsea. Chelsea should be top 12. Okay? That's fair. At least based off what the Abramovich era had built. They should be top 12. At least. But you give it to this guy, Enzo Maresca. Okay. So Enzo Maresca comes in, and this is a return to the Potter ideal. Pochettino was more a return to the Tuchel idea, or ideal, which is we need a proven winner. Even though Pochettino wasn't really a proven winner, he was like a big name coach. And Maresca was more of a Potter, like a long-term idea Potter didn't work, but this idea is still good for us, saying Blueco. We're going to give it to Maresca and see what happens. So they bring in a manager who they think they can control, and who, to be fair to them, was controllable because he was a championship manager. They went and got him from the perfect place, and they install him into Chelsea Football Club, and they're basically like, do what we tell you to do. Listen to the medical team, listen to our the scouts, and they even had input on who Maresca was to play in games. Not, I think he had the final say, but the idea that the ownership group or people in power are like trying to influence this player, his value is kind of decreasing based on our data and our analytics. So it will be good if we play him for a little bit longer, because the ultimate goal of this ownership group is to make money. And in order to make money incrementally, you can do that through player trading, which is what I think their ultimate scheme is just to use Chelsea as a way station to take young prospects, develop them, sell them on. Not too dissimilar from a Dortmund model, except the Dortmund model is, how would you phrase it, or the Ajax model? Those are sales of necessity. In order to keep our club alive in the way that it functions, we need to make profit by selling players, even to local rivals like Dortmund, like from Dortmund to Bayern. Excuse me. That has to happen, just so our club can exist in the way that it needs to exist for the people that enjoy it. Chelsea don't need to sell to anybody and to exist in the way that the fans want it to exist. Like there's no other than like the PSR and or is it PSL? Was it the financial stability rules? What used to be called fair play, financial fair play. Chelsea don't need to do any of that. Like they have enough money. If they use their money correctly and don't spend £1 billion on Garnacho and Gittins and these men, they'll be fine. So there's no incentive from the fans to be a selling club. But the business model that these people have is to eventually become a selling club, because after 10 years, they can then start to take money out of the club. We haven't got to that part yet, but we'll get there. So Maresca is perfect for this because he has to say yes. If you want the Chelsea job, you just say yes. Yes, sir. No, sir. What do you want, sir? They tell you to jump, you say how high. Then something happens. This happens. Chelsea they F around and they win the Conference League. And on one hand, you could say great achievement. You won a European trophy. I think last season's last season's biggest achievement outside of this Club World Cup that we're looking at is getting into the Champions League, qualifying for the Champions League, not necessarily winning the Conference League. It's a UCL of a different kind. That objective of winning a trophy, I feel like gave Maresca the idea of, wait a minute, I might actually be good at this. Like this squad might actually be able to win something. Like we might actually be able to compete. If you remember last season, Chelsea around this time were equally maybe second, third in the table. I think they even had a time where they were first, but games in hand had them had the teams that were below them gave them the capacity to go above Chelsea is what I'm trying to say. So they were first for like a fleeting second. He came out and said, we're not ready to compete. It's not the time. Just managing expectations, I think, is Maresca's. It's perhaps one of the things that he tried, but just failed at, because you're telling a fan base that's accustomed to winning that this isn't a winning thing. Like, we're not ready yet. Even Mourinho tried this, if you remember, in 2013-14, where he says, we're the little horse and we need milk, and next season we can compete. Mourinho would at least give you next season we can compete. Maresca was a little bit more hesitant. But then what ended up happening is they messed around. They won the UEFA Conference League, which they were expected to win because they were the strongest team in it. They basically fielded their B team and went through everybody, playing teams like Noah and others. Like, your hardest test is Betis in the final. With all due respect to Betis, Chelsea should win that game. Now, the Club World Cup, I think, is where that feeling that Maresca had, I think it doubles even further, where he's like, no. We beat the brakes, in his mind, off PSG, who are the best team in the world, and could easily make that argument based on what they did to Inter in the Champions League final. PSG, great team, but the winner of the Club World Cup was Chelsea Football Club. Now, for the fans, this sets up the 2025-2026 season as, okay, you've proven that you can win in Europe, albeit the smallest one you can win. You've proven that you can win in a continental, international, galactic level with the Club World Cup. Cool. Now, can this translate to Premier League success? And down the line, can it lead to Champions League success? So Chelsea find themselves in the same situation where you're basically competing for a title for like a week. Liverpool are down. Arsenal kind of went through that little malaise period of basically a month ago. Manchester City didn't get the hottest start, so that gave Chelsea perhaps an impetus to get going, but they just never took it to that level. But is the fault there with Maresca, or is the fault with the people who are constructing the squad that he has to maintain? Maresca, maybe I've called him a manager a few times here, but Maresca is not a manager. Maresca is the head coach. And this is a delineation that has happened within the past decade plus of football. No longer do we get Alex Ferguson. No longer do we get Jose Mourinho. No longer do we get Arsene Wenger. Managers are few and far between. I think Pep is labeled as one. Arteta might be labeled as one. Jurgen Klopp was one. But most of the figureheads of these football clubs on the pitch are head coaches, which means you get minimal input in the players that come in. You get some say, but not final say. And basically, you work with the squad that the club provides you. Now, what happens when the club doesn't provide you with what you think you need to compete? What happens when the club is so down on your performance based on last season that, according to the BBC's, I think it's Kinsella, Nizar Kinsella, Chelsea were talking with De Zerbi last summer, who's the manager of Marseille. So, and that's another Brighton connection. there's so many Brighton links that Egbali. You know what? Let's bring these dumbasses up, bro. Egbali is the one on the left. Sometimes I get my left and right confused. He's the brown one. The white one is Todd Boehly. Egbali was discussing bringing De Zerbi to Chelsea Football Club in the summer. Now, if Maresca hears wind of that, it kind of makes sense why these reports that have come out that Enzo Maresca since October, let's say, was considering his future at Chelsea Football Club. Now, for me, I'm like, what's going on? It's this. You've won what is being presented, certainly by FIFA, as a major trophy. Why are we still struggling? Why can't I get the players that I want? I've proven that if we play my way, I can win you things. Why don't I have the center backs? Why don't I have the striker that I want? Why am I not getting a better goalkeeper? Like, all of these squad issues that are so evident. I'm sure Maresca had input that I want a particular style. I want players in these areas. And the players that came in over the summer, I mean, again, Garnacho, Gittins, Hato, project players. And not in like not the projects, but a project, like players that it's going to take time for this one to work. I think he felt disillusioned. Then he finds out that the club is kind of skittish with him. And it comes back to these guys, man. Do they know how to operate a big time football club? Even between themselves, there's conflict where last year, I want to say around September, October time, there was reports that there's an internal civil war between Todd Boehly, who owns somewhere north of 10% of the football club, and Clearlake, who owns somewhere north of 60%. Boehly was the sporting face of the ownership consortium that came through because he had experience, I suppose, with the Los Angeles Lakers and the Dodgers. I think he went to the London School of Economics. So you could present him as the front face of this project, but really the big money is the private equity, which is owned by Egbali and Feliciano. So what does this mean? This means the people who control the purse strings are now the ones making the footballing decisions, even though neither of them should be making football decisions, but the one who is least qualified to have the final say is the one who has the final say, which is why everything that has transpired from Thomas Tuchel to Graham Potter to Lampard to Pochettino, it's getting hard to keep track. Now to Enzo Maresca, and then whoever's next. So what, and how do I word this? My ultimate issue is, and I don't want to defend Enzo Maresca necessarily, because I do feel like he's done idiotic things both on the pitch and off the pitch. So if we just want to talk tactics quickly, the idea that Malo Gusto is inverting every game, is shooting from 30 yards every game, that doesn't need to be a principle of play. Of course, it can be useful maybe in bigger matches where you need somebody who has a little bit more steel about them. Maybe you're playing a Barcelona in the Champions League, you're playing Manchester City or Arsenal in the Premier League. Like maybe you do want to put somebody who's a bit more defensively solid or defensive minded in the middle of the park, and then you can play Reece James out there, or they can interpret between themselves what happens. Cool. The positioning of Cucurella is very interesting. He seems to have the freedom to play wherever he wants on the left. He can overlap on the wing. He can stay where he is. He can become a midfielder. Sometimes you even see him playing like secondary striker in case a cross comes in the box and maybe he's just at the back post or what have you. So there are things that Maresca has done that you would question on the pitch. Then his substitutions, it seems like every game he has to take off a defender. It's just like normally a back four is something that you want to keep consistent. It's not something that you want to change all the time because you want them to kind of play as one. And they need to play as one, especially in the VAR era where everything is reviewable. If somebody's butt cheek is a bit too far, then you could be conceding goals. Just look at Barcelona under Hansi Flick. Like the margins are so thin that the better the understanding is between the players, it can only benefit. But when I'm going to take out this center back and put in this one just so there's squad harmony, you think, what's going on here? Like, is he not thinking about what he's up to? But then the more you think about it, and now the reports have come out, perhaps it's these guys. Perhaps it's the board level who's like, you're not playing. Who could the center back be? You're not playing Chalobah enough, and his value is going down. You're not playing Badiashile enough. You're not playing Fofana enough. You're not playing Tosin enough. So he has to make the moves. Otherwise, he's not working well. He's not managing up well. And that could cost him his job. But I could see how someone who's like, bro, I don't want to be told necessarily that I have to play this person or I can't play this person because they're in the yellow. And if I play them, perhaps something bad happens to them. Like my job is on the line. There are points on the line. I want to do what I want to do. And I think when you win a trophy, it gives you a bit of confidence. Not even a bit of confidence. It gives you supreme confidence, I would think, that I'm on the right track here. You just have to believe me. Something that I think is happening at Chelsea Football Club at this moment in time is for both players and these young coaches that they're bringing through. When you bring someone when you hire someone or buy someone who doesn't have a great political standing at the time, it's easier to tell them what to do, how to play, where to play, anything, because they're coming into a nominally big club with the expectation that winning is demanded here. And they're going to acquiesce to you because they have no other choice. But what happens when in the course of this project, I start to develop a sense of confidence in myself and in my own ability, both as a player and as a manager. So if you bring in inexperienced managers, eventually the manager is going to become experienced. What if he messes around and wins a Club World Cup? What if Cole Palmer messes around and becomes a world-class player? Like, of course you want that, not only for your club, but for these guys, you want to sell them on eventually. But the political standing that a player like Cole Palmer or Moises Caicedo now has, or that Enzo Maresca was starting to feel based on his reputation. I mean, Manchester City are approaching him. Manchester City, who have won, 6 of the last 7 Premier Leagues, 7 of the last 8 maybe, could even win this year. Pep Guardiola is obviously on his way out. You're looking at a team that has Erling Haaland and Turkey and so many good players in it. They're coming to him, Dama. They're coming to him like, hey, Pep might be out. Would you like Manchester City? So of course he must be feeling like, yo, I'm doing something right. But these guys, they're not respecting me. Now, I've seen, the kind of the post sacking briefs that come out from, you name it, the Times, the Independent, BBC, the Athletic. It's kind of why I waited until today, because I was going to do this yesterday, but I was like, let's just wait and let's read a bit, because all of the good stuff comes out post sacking. It takes like 20, 48 hours for everyone to write up. I think one thing we need to be conscious of as people who take on this information is, where is this information coming from? Whose interest does this report serve? From a Matt Law, Dave Ornstein, Kinsella, Ben Jacobs? Like, who's giving them the information that they feel confident enough to report this, and then who's benefiting from it? So I would think, and as a matter of fact, I know that Chelsea have inroads with those reporters far more than Enzo Maresca has inroads with those reporters. Enzo Maresca is now represented by Jorge Mendes, famous football agent from Portugal. So I'm sure there is some wiggle room that they'll have to get their kind of narrative spin out. But the dominant narrative spin that people are going to be hearing for the next week is what Chelsea wants you to hear, which is Enzo Maresca wasn't working well with us. Enzo Maresca was looking elsewhere. He was disillusioned with the project. He didn't want to listen to our medical advice. He was, I don't know, getting a bit too big for his boots. And on one level, when you own something, I suppose you can feel that way about an employee. But at the same time, and that doesn't mean that the viewing public should have the same view of this employee that his bosses have. I mean, that's just silly. As someone who supports a football club, you should be a little bit more open-minded to what's going on behind the scenes. Not everything you hear is being given to you out of good faith. It's being given to you to form a narrative that justifies the sacking of Maresca, or the falling out with Maresca. It's positioned to make Chelsea Football Club not look as bad. But I do think neither party comes out looking the greatest. And I think Chelsea, for me, look the worst. It seems like their insistence on fulfilling this young player project, sell on for more money, I think that's coming ahead in whatever race between Chelsea actually winning football matches and winning trophies. And it's why I feel pretty bad, because I do have one more picture. See, I want to be careful here, because Chelsea Football Club doesn't become available. I was going to say Chelsea Football Club doesn't become available to manage that often, but this is their 7th manager, I think. Tuchel. I'm going to try to count again. Tuchel, Potter, Lampard, Poch, Maresca. So this is going to be manager 6, and they've only been in charge for like 4 years. Chelsea Football Club doesn't become available. It shouldn't. That's the word. Chelsea Football Club shouldn't be available to manage regularly. Maybe it should come available once every 3 years, 4 years. So to be in the right window to get that job, which is, again, of a top 12 European club, top 15, if just to be safe. Someone like Liam Rosenior, who is within the Blue Code network, who is showing promising signs at Strasbourg, who I've listened to a few of his interviews, and he seems like a articulate, smart, coherent football guy. His father was obviously a manager. um, in England, for what it's worth. I mean, I don't know how you don't accept the Chelsea job if it becomes open, but I would be supremely hesitant if I was Roy Senior. You're walking into a situation where Chelsea probably they not even probably Chelsea need Champions League football, so you have to come top five. That's without question. But you're coming into a squad that's going to be pretty much wrecked. I would think. I would think that squad yesterday and today are like, what the hell? Like, what is going on at this place? This is some of these managers, some of these players, excuse me, have all the managers I've listed. I think there are a few players in the squad who have gone through all of these changes. So it's kind of like, damn, here we go again. If Roy Senior doesn't hit the objectives by the end of this season, I could see it very easily where he leaves and maybe some star from the World Cup, maybe Julian Nagelsmann, who's managing Germany at the moment. Let's say Germany don't have a good tournament, or they do have a good tournament, and he leaves. They could easily get rid of him. So this is the other point. Because Roy Senior is connected with Blueco, I wonder if he even has the ability to say no. which for me would be very scary. If, because I'm managing Strasbourg, I can't tell you no. Like, I have to leave. So I can't do what's in the best interest of my career. I have to do what's in the best interest of this corporation, this network of clubs, which means you're just going to take me from Strasbourg and you're going to put me in Chelsea. And I don't get to say yes or no. I just have to say, yes, sir. It's difficult for me to want that for him. At the same time, it is an opportunity to manage Chelsea. And maybe that's what he wants. Maybe he wants the opportunity to manage Chelsea Football Club. I'm not sure. So we'll see what happens in the next few days, whether or not it could be tomorrow. It could be, a week from now. But the likelihood is Roy Senior is going to be the one. Personally, it just feels like, whenever things start going bad, let's just hand it to the black guy and just see what happens. It's like, because I see what's happening at Celtic at the moment. It's like that club's in disarray, and they just give it to Wilfred Nancy. It's like, that's not going to work, and it's going to ruin his reputation and where he could go in the future. If Roy Senior is who they think he is, and they think he's one to earmark, Chelsea at age 41, I mean, that's pretty young. So I'm between a rock and a hard place on this one. Like, don't do it, but if you have to do it, I wish you the best. Do I have anything else written down here? No, not really. I just think, it's unfortunate for Maresca. I think he'll land in a good spot. I think if Pep leaves, I think he'll certainly get a decent shake at the Manchester City job. If not, Italian coaches get passed around Serie A like a football, let's say. That could go different ways, but everybody manages everywhere. Conte goes around, Allegri goes around, everybody, Ranieri goes around. So at least, at worst, let's say he'll find a landing spot in one of the big 4 or 5 Italian clubs. Certainly Antonio Conte is going to fall out with Napoli eventually. So maybe that would be a good landing spot for him. Perhaps if Simeone leaves Atletico Madrid, maybe that could be a place for him in Spain. I did remember one thing. I'll leave with this. Because I don't want this longer than 40 minutes. Because I don't want to get y'all into the habit that I'm doing this for 40 minutes. Maresca came out a few months ago and said, they asked him, you're not playing Sterling. You're not playing Disassi. Do you think that's good for them? Do you think it's good for their mental health? Like, players just being benched, exiled from the squad, coming to train at 8 p.m. When everybody's basically gone. And Maresca said something to the effect of, being a footballer, I've been there. It's not that bad. If you want to talk about struggle and hard work, my father is a fisherman, and I've seen him, working hard hours out on his boat or whatever the case was. And I was just like, come on, man. Enzo Maresca was a professional footballer, and he even suggested that something like that had happened to him in the past. That a manager or managers had exiled him, treated him unfairly, in his view, and it's kind of part and parcel of being a footballer. Where I'm like, if you eventually get into a position of power where you're able to do it or not do it to somebody else, you don't justify your exiling or shunning of professional footballer who's basically done nothing except being paid too much by your bosses. You don't justify it by saying, well, it happened to me, and there's worse things out there, like being a fisherman. I find it quite humorous, and I kind of enjoy that both Sterling and Disassi, even though Disassi may be going on loan quite soon, I'm enjoying the fact that at least, even if their Chelsea careers are never to resurrect, that at least they've outlived the man who said that, yo, my dad is a fisherman. So that does make me feel a little bit good. I won't lie. But the more I think about it, I think everything Enzo Maresca said up until like the latter end was him positioning and posturing for the people above him who are making the decisions. So they ask him in a press conference about Disassi, about Sterling, about the so-called bomb squad. And he has to say what he has to say. He's not going to go against his bosses up until it was his time to go against his bosses. But that's kind of the point, that when your neck is on the line, you're willing to say you're willing to say anything in order to justify why you feel the way you feel. But when it was up to someone else and you were participating in the, I don't want to say persecution, that's too far, but in the shunning or the scapegoating of Sterling, Disassi, etc., he was more than willing to kind of throw rocks. So I guess that's just part of being a football manager these days. Surely a part of being the manager of Chelsea Football Club. Back to the Rosenior part. Again, I don't know if Rosenior can say no. On the premise that he does have some autonomy and he can say no, that he's not a slave or enslaved. Why would you want this job right now? Provided you can get it later because they've earmarked you somehow. Just wait. Because in 18 months or 12 months, whoever they hire again will be sacked, and you'll have a little bit more seasoning, a little bit more time, and maybe a more advantageous moment in time to get your ideas off. Because I'm not sure how similar Rosenior is to Maresca. I haven't watched that much of Rosenior's Strasbourg team. But what Maresca was up to, I do wonder. You'd have to go to Blue Lions or somebody like that probably knows. What are the similarities? What are the differences? How long would it take for Rosenior's tactics to be embedded in the team? And by then, are you out of the Champions League? Have you lost all hope of qualifying again for the Champions League? And does that taint or tarnish your reputation to a point where in the summer, they're like, well, we tried it. It was 6 months, 4 months. Because they'll probably sign him to what? A 1.5-year contract with an extension. So if it were me, Liam, practice your French, learn your French, and make sure that you stay if you can. Because that seems like a good spot, relatively. Also, if you're Strasbourg, Strasbourg fan, supporter, director, president, well, not president because the president is obviously Bluco. If they can just snatch players on loan, your manager from your club. I mean, speaking of enslaved, I mean, at that point, Strasbourg is a a colony of Chelsea. That Chelsea goes, takes whatever it wants, the resources from Strasbourg, and takes them to London, West London to be exact. So the confirmation that your club is just a middleman, a midpoint, basically a worse version of Vitesse, if people remember that experiment from way back when. Yeah, I feel like that knowledge would drive me even more angry than I probably already am at my club being owned by Blue Co. I'm trying to think if I have anything left on the table. You know what? It's always good to consult the Notes app. So I'm going to do that. Man. I'm writing something about Dave Chappelle. So it has nothing to do with Chelsea or Blue Co. Let's see. See, there's always one more thing. What did I say here? Chelsea fans should find the energy they found against the Super League and use it to remove the leadership of their club. This is. I promise. I'll leave on this because I need to actually go out for my walk. It's getting dark. What is the solution then here? Oh wow. What is the solution? So these guys have a 10-year project. I think it's contractually obligated that they have to stay for at least a decade. And after a decade is when they'll be able to start taking profits from the club, a la the Glazers at Manchester United. So what happens here? Can anything change? In the short term, I don't think so. I think football fans are a particular breed. I think, do I say we here? I think we often underestimate just how rabid and just how much pride and how much of one's personality and identity is wrapped or enveloped by supporting a football club. And the steps that it would take to oust an ownership group are steps that someone who is so enveloped and enthralled and taken by their football club is not going to be willing to do. So online, it may be easy for people to protest, to, hashtag Blue Co out and, all of this. Or even whoever the manager is, you can hashtag Maresca out. But that's not going to do anything, really. Where the power lies is twofold. And even the first fold folds into the second. So it's really one fold. The people who attend matches, the match-going support, have to be willing to be... Not even they have to be willing. They have to get so upset, so angry, so disillusioned that they just stop going to games. That's the only way that it ends. That's the only way that they would sell. Really. Empty stadiums, every Premier League home match, every Champions League game, every League Cup game, FA Cup matches, just empty stadiums. An empty stadium. That's the only way. Essentially hurting the pockets, but not just the pockets. It's hurting the worldwide reputation of the brand globally, but in a tangible way. Because I feel like a lot of people overplay, not that social media is unimportant and it can't affect anything. I think we've seen, even in the last year, that social media can be very effective in projecting and getting your message out and making people stop and think and say, whoa, like that is a genocide, for example. That's happening in Palestine. So social media can be effective in that way. But I think certainly in the West, the function of social media has been so consumed and it's been played out that a hashtag movement isn't going to stop or make a consortium sell an asset that's worth upwards of £4 to £5 billion. That's just not going to happen. But what can, I think, push that narrative of, obviously you can use social media to do it, is a concerted effort by those that go to Stamford Bridge and those who travel with the team to just pull back fully. You can still support from your house, but that stadium that these guys are in, being fully empty, quiet, only away fans or just the few hundred people, maybe 1,000 people who traveled, from Asia, Africa, Australia, South America, North America, wherever else. I think that's it. Other parts of Europe. Do the Penguins travel from Antarctica? I'm unsure. That's the only way. You have to make their ownership so untenable, so obviously tainted and marred, that they just say, okay, we're selling. Now, the protest itself isn't an end. The protest is your ability to voice your demand. And if the demand can't be met or can't be forced, then the protest is useless. Because the protest is just you blowing off steam, but there's nothing behind it. What has to be behind it is you protest, you go outside the stadium, you say, Blue Cow out, Blue Cow out, Blue Cow out, Blue Cow out, Egbali out, Boehly out, whoever. But then, the reporter asks you, well, how do you plan to do that? Just saying it is not going to make them leave. They have $5 billion, right? Well, we're going to empty out the stadium. We're going to not buy anything from the Chelsea megastore. We're not going to spend money on tickets. We're not going to frequent anything that Chelsea Football Club are doing. That would then send a clear message to Clearlake that what they're doing is untenable. But even then, I feel like once you get to a point where you have billions, you can just say it is what it is, but on a real level. I feel like a lot of us say it is what it is from a poverty standpoint. But what if you could say it is what it is from a wealthy standpoint? Hey, it is what it is. The stadium's empty. I don't know how you get rid of them. Everybody brings their $1. There's not enough people. There's not enough money. There's not enough money from the fan base to buy these dudes out. And even if you did, in some miracle world, find the money, they could still just say no. So you can see the ideas of whatever working idea that they had at the beginning. But at this point, it's so sour and rotten that the only thing that's going to stop this train is I don't even know. I was trying to think of what would stop it. What would stop Blue Coat? There's nothing. In the same way that somebody would have felt this way about Roman Abramovich, the only thing that stopped Roman Abramovich was, again, a proxy war of the world. So I guess, for Blue Coat to sell, somebody's gonna have to invade America. America's gonna have to. Something's got to happen to where then American ownership becomes. You just can't. America would have to invade England. That's the only way. It's the only way. It's the only way. It's the 250th anniversary of America. Maybe they decide, you know what? That crazy ass person in the White House just goes, you know what? I want Greenland. I also want England. And then American owned things in London. Do you see where we are? We're at this insane point where there's the likelihood of Chelsea being sold within the next 5 years, even 15 years. I think is supremely unlikely, highly unlikely, which means every 12 to 18 months, Chelsea fans are going to be, flying by the seat of their pants, not knowing exactly where the club is going to land. It could end up with some Club World Cup type success. It could also end up in relegation form because the players that they've bought don't pan out. The managers that they hire just don't pan out either. There's a lot that could be said. There's a lot that will be said on the Talking Tactics podcast this week. I encourage everybody to check it out, or next week. Yeah, if my voice can hold up, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll talk about AFCON, bro, because it's round of 16. Got some really good games coming up. So thank you guys for paying attention, sticking with your boy. Shout out to Enzo Maresca. All in all, I'd probably grade Enzo Maresca's Chelsea tenure. Just to conclude, what would I give him for a number grade? Considering all the things that he had to deal with, I'm going to give Enzo Maresca an 82 out of 100. That feels a bit high, actually. 79. What is that? C plus? I think C plus is a fair grade. I think he developed some players, but I feel like tactically he was a bit naive. He didn't manage up well. I'm not quite sure he managed down that well, but at the end of the day, he did get Champions League. He won the Conference League. And for what it's worth, he won the fake FIFA Intergalactic Club World Cup bullshit. But it's a trophy, and you beat PSG. So, Maresca, you get a passing grade. But the club... the club in the past 18 months, it's looking like a 50.